chose to come out and be with us. This has been our third year, or this will be 3 years now since Sam has played for us. So we're excited to get back into the swing of things again. You know, with COVID and construction and all those things going on. But now we're ready to start. Sam just got back from Germany last night. So I'm amazed that he's here. He made himself available for us. And if you fall asleep, you know, you understand why. Could I lead us in a prayer?
Amen.
Start, please. God, would you bless our evening tonight? God, thank you for the skills that you give to us. Especially we are praising you for Sam and the influence that he has had with his testimony and all over the world, literally, all over the world. And we pray, God, that you bless him tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Great. All right. Well, good evening. This is on. Let me see.
You may have to push the button.
Push the button. Okay.
Seal light.
Wait.
Should be able to seal light when you push it.
No light. Ah, there is now light. Wait. Hello? All right. You just got to do the right things. Well, welcome. I'm very happy to be here tonight. And that is true. I've been the last 9 days in Germany. And at this time, right now, I was coming in from Bonn, Germany. And the reason is because I'm a big performer of the music of Beethoven. And Beethoven's birthday was Friday. He was born on December 16th, 1770. And I was scheduled to be in Bonn on December 16th, 2020, which was the 250th anniversary of his birth. So 1770, 2020. There was going to be 1,000 Beethoven concerts a day worldwide in 2020. And then COVID hit. There was no way that Germany was going to let me in. And then in 2021, they were still having problems in Germany. And so finally, 2022, I was in Germany and gave 6 concerts in Bonn and Cologne region, and it was very moving. What's very moving is his house, where he was born in, is a museum. And it's very moving, very moving. Just, he lived there for 18 years, then went to Vienna, Austria, because that was the sort of the epicenter of classical music. Studied with Mozart. Mozart was a teacher for him for a while. And then he came back because his mother passed away. He was very close to his mother. And I saw his mother's grave on Friday as well and went to the museum. So it was very moving to be there and to play. And the concert I played on Friday night, his birthday, was a 2-minute walk from the house. That's how close it was. 2 minutes from the house is where I played, right in the center of Bonn, Germany, of the city. And I just share this, basically. Everything in the town is Beethoven. We parked at the Beethoven parking lot. It's called the Beethoven parking lot. The high school is Beethoven. In fact, when you drive into the city, Bonn is the city. They don't call it Bonn. They call it Beethoven Stadt. Stadt is city. So Beethoven City dash, oh, by the way, it's called Bonn, you know. So I thought that's pretty special in that sense. But there are statues of him everywhere. And what I did, which was special, is that there is a walking tour of many things where he played as a 10-year-old in church, the organ. And there's the organ that he played on and other things. So there's lots of things. There were lots of people there for his birthday. And I had to reserve a ticket at 10 o'clock to get me in when it opened. So I share that with you. I hope I could share that. And so my wife is here tonight. This is my wife in the back here. You can stand up. Her name is Deborah in the red there. She looks like a, and we've been married 49 years. And she came in case I fall asleep at the piano. So if I fall asleep at the piano, she'll take over and play the rest of the concert. No, that's not true. So, but when I was here 3 years ago, I had played all Beethoven. It was 2019, and I was getting ready for 2020 and everything, and I had a Beethoven mask. I don't know if you remember having the death mask of Beethoven, and it's back now to the owner. If I didn't return it, I'd be in jail, so I didn't want to not fulfill my obligation. So I'm going to play you some Beethoven, but I'm going to play you also some Russian music and some Mozart, so it's a variety, and then share my testimony how music's not the most important thing in my life, but Jesus Christ. So I'm going to start with a piece by Beethoven. So, as you know, the thing that was very unique about Beethoven is that in his late 20s, he began to go deaf. He began to lose his hearing, and eventually, at the age of 32, basically, he was totally deaf. And so 80% of his music he wrote, and he couldn't hear it. So imagine that some of the greatest music you can hear was written by a man who couldn't hear it. And so I've been asked for 40 years, 50 years, how did a man write music if he can't hear it? And I did this example on Friday as well. You don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. So I'm going to sing for you the Star Spangled Banner. I'm going to sing, you don't sing. Oh, who say can. Do you hear the Star Spangled Banner? Of course you do. You hear it in your head. And you know what's the example I use around the world? I mean, Japan, or I sing Happy Birthday. Everybody knows Happy Birthday. They do not know the Star Spangled Banner in Germany. But in America, I use the Star Spangled. So I always sing, everyone, you know, Happy Birthday is universal. So I sing Happy Birthday. So the point is that you don't need to hear music with your ears to hear music in your head. And the difference is, of course, you've heard Happy Birthday. That's how you know Happy Birthday. But Beethoven heard music that nobody heard. And a man asked him, how did he get his musical ideas? This was a letter that he received. And Beethoven wrote back, it's a very famous quote. He says, the music in my mind has been given to me by the Almighty God, and I am putting it down on paper for him. I mean, that's a very humble statement. I mean, here is this man who can't hear the music, but God gives him the music. He takes ink and puts it on white piece of paper, and 200 years later, Sam Rotman hears it, and I'm weeping uncontrollably because it's so beautiful. So I share that because this piece by Beethoven, he wrote it while he was going deaf. It's a piece called the Pathetique. Pathos is a Greek word which means suffering. That's where you get the Greek word of the suffering of Christ, the pathos de Christi. The suffering. It's not emotion, it's suffering. And in the very beginning, you'll hear these chords. This is suffering. Angst, it's a German word. It gets very fast. When you see my right hand going over my left hand, this is Beethoven talking to himself. So the first part is this, very tragic chords, very sad, very painful, and then this conversation. The second part, so this piece is about 15 minutes long. By the way, the program's about an hour and 20 minutes or so no long. We're at 7:30-ish or so. So then the second part you think would be full of this anxiety, but it's absolute peace. I have friends who believe it's the most beautiful piece Beethoven ever wrote. That's quite a statement. Beethoven accepts this. I will write music for God, but I won't hear it. But I accept it. It's absolute peace. The third part is fast, and at the end of the piece, Beethoven is hitting the piano with his fist, not literally his fist, but you'll hear these punctuations, and he's trying to hear something from the piano, and he can't hear it. That's the problem. He wants to hear. So there's a very famous piece, the Pathetique, in 3 parts, about 15 minutes or so, 16 minutes, by Beethoven. Thank you. Thank you. So next one I'll play you a piece now by Mozart. Mozart taught Beethoven for a while, but then he had to go back. I mean, he taught him for maybe about 2 months, and then he went back to Vienna. And then by the time he came back, Mozart had passed away very young, age of 35. So he studied with a man named Haydn, who was another great composer. And he studied with him for a much longer time and became very close to Haydn. Haydn was 24 years older than Beethoven, but Haydn thought that Beethoven was magnificent. So this is a Mozart. You've all heard this piece. It's a famous piece called Rondo à la Turque. Children play it, things like this, but it's a very wonderful piece by Mozart. You'll all recognize it. So next I'm going to play you two pieces by a French composer, Debussy. And I like to sort of describe these pieces as what they call impressionistic music. In other words, there's a story behind these pieces, and so you can visualize it and sort of see what he's trying to portray. Debussy always tried to paint pictures with his music. So the first piece is a famous piece he wrote called The Sunken Cathedral. So there's a story to this. It's based on a French poem. You're on the coast of France, and it's very foggy. After about 30 seconds, you're going to hear 3 soft bells. So you'll hear these 3 bells. The water starts moving, and the bells get louder, and the water moves, and the bells get louder. And then out of the water comes this gigantic cathedral, Gothic cathedral. So, you know, in Europe, it took them 200 years to build a church. So if it takes a little longer in your parking lot, don't worry about it. But and you know, it's pretty massive, holds 10, 15,000 people or so around. So you can imagine this gigantic cathedral coming out of the water. You'll know when it happens. You'll know. The water starts moving again, and then the whole cathedral sinks back into the water. That's why it's called the Sunken Cathedral. The titles are all in French. The French title is La Cathédrale, the cathedral in French, engloutie. La Cathédrale engloutie. Engloutie means engulfed, and we translate it sunken. You at the very end, you hear 2 soft bells. The fog returns, this fog. 2 soft bells, and the piece ends. The second piece is called General Levine Eccentric. It's about an American named Edward Levine, who is purported to be the most famous juggler in the world. And he went and performed in Paris in 1905. He used to wear a kind of a military coat. That's why they call him General Levine. His name was Edward Levine, but he billed himself as the... So he would come out. You'd hear a trumpet call at the beginning, ta-ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-ta-tam. And then this man comes out very sheepishly, he's juggling, and he throws a pin way up in the air. It's actually a written sour note. It's a written mistake. It sounds like a mistake because everyone's sort of, but then as the pin's going to hit the ground, he grabbed it because he was the world's greatest juggler. So it's a very comical piece. He kind of entertains one side of the audience, the other side of the audience. There's all these antics going on. That's the word that was used for him. Debussy, the French composer who wrote these pieces, he said that he saw him perform in Paris. That's why he wrote this piece, because he saw him perform and he went home and wrote this piece about this act. He said the French audience roared with laughter at the antics of Mr. Levine, but were in awe of him as he surely is the world's greatest juggler. So isn't that a great comparison? He acts like he doesn't know what he's doing, but he was great. So the Sun Cathedral, listen to this. You can almost close your eyes and envision it, the soft bells, cathedral coming up. And then this juggler, this jongleur, the General Levine Eccentric. Thank you, thank you. Well, next I'm going to play you three pieces by the Russian composer Rachmaninoff. So I like to have these two sort of comparisons because Debussy and Rachmaninoff, Debussy was in Paris, Rachmaninoff was in Russia, in Moscow. They were writing this music at the same time. And one has sort of droplets of sound, very delicate, that creates an image. And Rachmaninoff was giving you waves of emotion. So Rachmaninoff has a lot of power of his music. So he had, I always share this about Rachmaninoff, he had the biggest hands that ever played the piano. I have a big hand. From here to here, I can play 11 notes, almost 12, but that's pretty big. Rachmaninoff could play 15 notes, that's one hand. That's not a hand, that's a paw, I say. He could cover 30 notes with his hands. So his music's hard to play because he could just play it, but we have to struggle at it in that sense. There's sometimes on YouTube you see people say, Rachmaninoff, big hands. Me, small hands. I've seen some pianists say that on YouTube. So the first piece is typical of his music. There's a lot of melancholy to his music. He had a lot of personal suffering, but it's absolutely exquisite. And he uses almost every note of the piano. In the first piece he uses, I think, every note on the piano except 4 or 5 notes. The second piece he said was one of his favorite. It's called the Prelude in B minor. It has a lot of sadness to it, but it's very brilliant again, very powerful. The third piece is a piece that's the most famous piece he wrote called The Bells of Moscow. And you hear these big gongs and then these other sounds of the bells shimmering. It gets very fast, and at the end of the piece, you literally hear all the bells of all of Mother Russia ringing out. So a lot of very powerful playing and very powerful music, emotion. I always say Debussy is droplets of sound. Rachmaninoff is waves of emotion. And so, so the first piece, almost the whole keyboard. The second piece was one of his favorite, and the third, what's the most famous piece, the Prelude in C sharp minor, The Bells of Moscow. Well, I'd like to take a few minutes and share about myself as I have the other times that I've been here. And my story really begins with my parents. My father was born in Eastern Europe in a country called Romania in 1905. My mother was born in Eastern Europe. At that time, the country was called Czechoslovakia, and she was born there in 1915. So my parents were 10 years difference in age. And they were both Orthodox Jews. So the Orthodox Jews are the strictest Jews that really adhere to the Jewish faith. They want to follow all the laws that God gave to the Jewish people in the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses. And so my parents left Europe in 1940 because of one person, and his name was Adolf Hitler. If my parents stayed in Europe, they both would have been murdered. That's absolutely. My father was 35. My mother was 25. They would have been sent to a concentration camp and murdered, or sent to a labor camp. And in a labor camp, once you got sick, they just shot you and killed you because there was no time for you to get well. But my parents escaped. There were a few countries in South America that had an immigration for Jews, and one of them was called Ecuador, right on the equator. So in 1940, my parents went to Quito, Ecuador. Now, I share this because 11 months after my father left Romania, the Nazis came to his village, his town in eastern Romania. They gathered all these Jews together, and over a 2-week period, they killed 10,000 Jews. And 2 of them were my grandparents. So my father lost his parents. He had a sister who was taken to a concentration camp and never heard from again. So in 1940, 1950, my parents lived there in South America. My brother was born there. My sister was born there. My mother was pregnant with me. And in the spring of 1950, my father filled out paperwork. He wanted to bring his family to the United States. They were given permission. They came through New York City, and I was born 5 months later in October of 1950. And I was raised, as you can imagine, in a very religious Jewish home. My grandparents died for being Jewish. My parents suffered for being Jewish, so I was instilled with all I could with my Jewish heritage. I went to public school during the day, and then I went to school in the synagogue where Jewish people worship, and it was called Hebrew school. If you're a young Jewish boy, you went to Hebrew school. The Jewish people speak Hebrew, so I learned Hebrew. I learned all about being Jewish. I learned hundreds of prayers. I went to Hebrew school 5 days a week for 8 years. So I can't emphasize how important this was. All my friends were Jewish. All my relatives were Jewish. I started Hebrew school when I was 8 until I was 16. So those, formidable years really had a big impact on me. I remember I'd wake up in the morning, I'd pray for a half an hour in Hebrew, and then I went to school and something unusual happened. It sounds funny now, but it was not funny at the time. But as I was growing older, about 11, 12 years old, I began to develop a very foul mouth. I could curse very easily. I could lie to my teachers. I could lie to my parents. I was very religious in the synagogue, and these prayers meant a lot to me. And I realized it was easy to be religious. I remember thinking that. You just act religious. You just be religious. And then an hour later, I'm swearing and cursing and lying, and that was easy. It was easy for me to be religious when I had to, and easy for me to be a sinner when I wanted to. Well, when I was 17, I went to a famous music school in New York City called the Juilliard School of Music. I was there for 5 years and got a bachelor's and a master's in piano. And there I met 3 students who said they were born-again Christians. Well, I had no idea what that was. I never heard that expression. But there was something quite unusual about these students. I'd see one of them in the cafeteria having lunch, and he would always be reading the Bible. I saw another one taking a break from practicing, and he'd be reading the Bible. And I thought, this is not a school of religion. It's a school of music. And these were highly talented students. And when they got together, all they did was talk about Jesus. Jesus said this, and Jesus did this, and why did Jesus say this, and what did he mean when he said this? They never mentioned church. I had no idea. They never mentioned about what they were at the church. They never mentioned the C word, Christianity. It was always Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus and Jesus. Well, they heard I was a religious Jew. They began to talk to me, and they basically asked me two questions. They asked me if I ever read the New Testament. And I told them, nope, not a word. I was told the New Testament was not a Jewish book. It was not for the Jews. So you'd never find one in our home. So I had no idea what was in it. I never saw one. I never read one, never touched one, zero knowledge. I mean, I knew nothing what was in this book. They asked me if Jesus could be the Messiah. The Jews are waiting for the Messiah. In Hebrew, it's called Mashiach. I said, he's not the hope for Jewish people. But you know, I was very moral. I didn't want to do anything to hurt my parents. My parents almost died for me. They sacrificed for me. So I never drank alcohol. To this day, I still don't know what a beer tastes like. Never been drunk. Never took drugs. Some of you may relate to this. I lived in New York City from 1968 to 1973. That was the height of the Vietnam War. That was the height of this group called the hippies. You know, all the drugs you want, all the sex you want, maybe you'll find happiness. I don't know how that worked out, but I'll tell you this. If you lived in New York City those years, it's not what drugs you wanted, it's how much drugs you wanted. There were drugs everywhere, everywhere. Never took anything. Never had premarital sex. So even though I was so moral on the outside, no sex, no drugs, no drinking, I'm going to tell you I was very, very immoral. I was very immoral. You know where? Right here. I knew that I was not on the inside the way I could appear on the outside. I could do many Jewish things, but it never affected me on the inside. I was very moral, I was very religious, but not changed. The same foul-mouthed, dirty-minded, self-centered, egotistical person at 20, at 18, at 16, and 14. Nothing changed about me except I was getting older. The same sins, the same problems, the same issues. So I made a big decision. I said, well, if I want to know about this person, Jesus Christ, I'll read this book called the New Testament. And that was a big step for a Jew to read the New Testament. I don't want to talk to a rabbi or a priest or a minister. No one's going to tell me what I'm reading. I'm going to read it myself. When I was a student at Juilliard, I used to practice for 10 hours a day. Now, let me tell you, that's not a lie or an exaggeration. I did not sit at the piano for 9 hours and 45 minutes. I sat every day at the piano for 10 full hours. I never left Juilliard until I practiced 10 hours. I started to read the New Testament, and my whole life came to a stop. I was absolutely shocked when I read this book. For the first time in my life, since I started piano as a 9-year-old boy, I stopped practicing. They had given me a little pocket New Testament, these three guys, these three students. And they said, well, Sam, if you read this book, start in this book called The Gospel of John. Never heard of it. But sure enough, I opened it up. There it is. Oh, there it is, yeah. The Gospel of John. So here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the light of the world. Wow. You know, to a Jew, the first book of the Bible called Bereshit, someone said light then. God said, let there be light. And this person comes along and says, I'm light. Here is a man, Jesus, who said of himself, I am the bread of life. Here's a man, Jesus, who said, no one comes to God, my Father, he said, except through me. He that has the Son of God has life. He that does not have the Son of God does not have life. Without me, you can do nothing. Oh, no, no, no. Without God, I can do nothing. Oh, no, no. Without me. Sam, you love God? You want to serve God? You want to follow God? You love me. You serve me. You follow me. You believe in God? Believe also in me. There's no difference. Well, we're in a beautiful church. I mean, this has all been remodeled, but let me tell you what I said to myself. Pardon me if you can. I said, this man's a lunatic. Listen, listen, listen. It wasn't funny. I was pretty disturbed. Moses never said words like this. Abraham, the father of the Jews, never said words like this. I was shocked at what Jesus kept saying about who he was. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm going to throw away this book. I'm going to go practice. This man's a lunatic. And at that moment, I said to myself, if Jesus is who he says he is, Let me repeat that again. If Jesus is who he says is. You know, my friend, you can ask 1,000 people who they think Jesus is, and maybe they'll get 1,000 different answers. But who cares who you think or I think Jesus is? Why don't you let Jesus tell you who Jesus is? Who are you, Jesus? You want to know who I am, Sam? I am the light of the world. You want to know who I am? And then Jesus said he came for sinners. I was not a sinner. I was very moral, religious. I spent my whole life looking good for God. I was on God's side. But Jesus said he came to bring forgiveness, and he said he came to change us on the inside. He called it a new heart, a new life, a new birth, a spiritual heart, a spiritual life, a spiritual birth. So I've played concerts in 61 different countries. You name a country, I've been there. All through Asia, all through Europe, all through South America. I've been to Cuba twice. I went to Cuba when you couldn't go to Cuba. 28 concerts I played in Cuba. And let me tell you what I've learned. My friend, there is not a smidgen of difference of people based on the color of your skin. I don't care if your skin color is green, purple, black, yellow, pink. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, Communist Party, Socialist Party, Independent Party, Labor Party. I don't care if you're a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, or a Christian. There's no difference. I don't care what language you speak. I don't care what culture you're from, because I'm telling you this reality. This is the reality. Now I hear there's 8 billion people in the world. 8 billion people. And each one of those people and each one of us are experts at hiding things. Hiding things. You know what's the first thing man did when he disobeyed God? The first thing, he hid. And we have figured out a million ways of how to hide things from people and God. You can hide things from your husband, your wife. You can hide things from your parents. You can hide things from a church. You can hide things from your friends. You can hide things from your boss at work. But let me tell you something. Nothing is hidden from this Jesus. Nobody hides anything. In fact, it says that he will reveal the things done in the darkness. And get these words. He will disclose the motive of men's hearts. He will disclose the motive of our hearts. There's a DVD of your whole life, externally, and another copy internally. And even though I was so moral and religious, I thought I was clever enough with my mind and crafty enough with my tongue that I could hide things from people and God. And on May 21st, 1971, 51 years ago, for the first time I prayed to Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you what I said. My name is Sam Rotman, and Jesus, I want you to take over my life. It's very simple. I want you to tell me what to do, and I will not tell you what to do. I told him the lies I said. I told him the dirty words I said. I told him the immoral thoughts I had. I decided 2 things. I'm not going to hide anything from Jesus. You know something? You don't need to hide anything from Jesus because you're not going to hide anything from Jesus. And I decided I'm not going to make any excuses. Do you realize you can come to Jesus Christ and you don't need to give him an excuse for anything you've ever done in your life? Think of that. In fact, if you give him an excuse, you're messing it up. You're really complicating it. We make it complicated. It's not complicated. I finished praying. I opened up my eyes. And in a billionth of a second, immediately, I knew that Jesus Christ completely changed me on the inside. He cleaned my mouth. I was shocked. I stopped cursing. And I remember a few minutes later, I couldn't form a curse word with my lips if I wanted to. I had a dirty, filthy mind. He cleaned it and changed it. And the next morning, I thanked him and thanked him and thanked him. And I couldn't wait to get to Juilliard. And I told every Jewish friend of mine that I met Jesus Christ. And he's changed me completely. I've played over 3,200 concerts. That's a lot of concerts. And I can tell you that all of my concerts are nothing. You know how much nothing is? Nothing compared to having Jesus Christ. The greatest thing I ever did in my life, the most important thing I ever did in my life, was to give my life to Jesus Christ. Music's not the most important thing in my life. Jesus is, because this is my friend. Only Jesus Christ can change your heart, period. Your wife can't change you. Your husband can't change you. Your parents can't change you. Your friends can't change you. The church can't change you. The government can't change you. Let me tell you something. You cannot change you. The hardest person to live with is you. But let me tell you, this is the miracle in the world. The miracle in this world is that Jesus Christ actually transformed the human heart. That's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. And he's done it to hundreds of millions of people over 2,000 years, and I'm one of them, little me. You know why I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. Think of it. That's the only reason I was born Jewish. The only reason I was Jewish. I was born into a Jewish family. If I was born in Egypt, I'd be a Muslim. If I was born in India, where I've done concerts, a Hindu. Or in Thailand, where I've played, a Buddhist. It's not a religion, my friend. It's a person. In him is life. A person, the central person of human history. Every time you write 2022, you're acknowledging Jesus Christ as the central person of human history. You know I was Jewish? I was born Jewish. And you know what happens when you go into a synagogue? The first thing you see in any synagogue, Reformed, Orthodox, Conservative, you'll always see the 10 Commandments. In every synagogue. You know what's the first thing you see when you walk into a church? You know what I call it? Forgiveness. I know it's called a cross. I call it forgiveness. Imagine the first thing in a synagogue is the law, the 10 Commandments. The first thing in a church is God's telling you, I've made a way to forgive you. And every time you look at that cross or someone wearing a cross, God's telling you, I've made a way to forgive you. Why don't you come to me and let me forgive you and be forgiven? Salvation is not what you will ever do for Jesus Christ. Salvation is everything that Jesus Christ has done for you. Nothing in my hands I bring, simply to Jesus Christ and his cross I cling. And I play the piano for him. Jesus gave me the ears to hear the music, the fingers to play the music, the mind to learn the music, the heart that I love the music. Jesus has never missed one of my concerts. I saw him 2 days ago in Bonn, Germany, and here he is tonight. He didn't have to fly on a plane with me to get here, by the way. And every time I give a concert in a church, concert hall in Europe, an orchestra, college, university, he's in the front row. And every time I sit down to play, he says, Sam, I'm looking forward to hearing you play for me this evening. My friend, if I look into your eyes, I tell you with every fiber of my being, it is worth living for Jesus Christ. Listen to me, I'm going to say it again. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. He's not a joke. He's not a phantom. He's not hocus pocus. He's not even a nice Christmas story. He is the life and the light of the world. Don't let anything become an excuse to keep you from the amazing life there is in Jesus Christ. Your past can disappoint you. A Christian can disappoint you. Other people can disappoint you. They're not worth it, but he's worth it. And you can say it like I did. You can tell him your name. My name is, tell him your name. And Jesus, I want you to take over my life, and he will. And I want you to forgive me, and he will. I want you to be with me and guide me and help me, and he will, and he will, and he will. Music gives me a lot of happiness. I passionately love music, but not one note of music will change me. At a concert, I'll play about 40,000 notes of music. Not one note will change me. Jesus changed me, transformed me, gave me a new life. My friend, it's worth living for him. It is worth living for Jesus Christ. Well, one last piece. And you know, I do something here. They've had me here many years doing these Christmas, concert in December. I'm going to play a piece, and then we're going to sing some Christmas carols. And you don't need to know the words because everybody knows the first verse of all the Christmas carols. So we're going to sing some Christmas carols, and then if you have some questions or anything, and then we have a reception with lots of sugar. So this piece, I'll end it with Beethoven. You've all heard this piece. It's a very famous piece called the Turkish March. Beethoven, before he went deaf, heard this being played by some street musicians in Vienna, Austria. He wrote it down. 20 years later, he wrote this piece. You'll hear this famous march. You'll have all heard this. And then there's these 6 little variations, each a different mood based on the march. And at the end, you hear the march again. So this is the last piece, the famous Turkish March by Beethoven. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, I thought we would have a time just to sing a few hymns and Christmas carols, I should say. And so, celebrating the Lord. So, let's sing it out. Go ahead. Joy. Thank you, thank you. Well, I know they have a reception here. Let me just mention, I have in the back there in the lobby, I'll be there for a few minutes and then come in here. I have some recordings, and one is all Beethoven, my favorite CD. It has 5 major works, including the Moonlight Sonata, a famous piece that Beethoven wrote, his most famous for piano. And then there's a recording of Debussy. You heard some of the Debussy, very delicate, has a famous piece, Clair de Lune. You listen to it and all the stress goes out of you. You'll be a puddle of water in the living room. If you want to have that, just relaxing, beautiful, very delicate music. Then there's a DVD of my whole testimony. It's produced by Jews for Jesus, and they made a documentary. It's what I shared tonight, mostly speaking, but I play on that as well. So it's a DVD. You watch it on a television. You know, you watch it as a... so there's 2 recordings of all music. Actually, no, there's another one, excuse me. I have a recording of all Russian music. Rachmaninoff that you heard, those are my specialties, Russian, French music, and Beethoven. So there's 3 music recordings, and then there's one, the DVD. They're each $15. There's no tax. The autograph is free. And I always say this, about 25 years ago, I gave a concert in Green Valley, south of Tucson. And that night, literally, I said the autograph is $15 and the CD is free. And a man came up to me afterward and said, "I'd like a CD with no autograph." I won't tell you what I said to him. But I'll always remember that. And since then, I don't say the cost is for the autograph, but it's for the CD. And but the autograph is free. So it's been a joy to be here. And Jerry mentioned about the date. And so I said, well, I'm kind of coming in from Germany, but I thought we've done this so many years. I thought, well, I'm going to come and do it. We haven't had it for since 2019, and praise the Lord for safety to bring me back, and you being here, and the beautiful sanctuary, and good to see Jerry again, his wife, and his family, and so praise the Lord. And I hope that you listen to what I shared, because that's the essence of life, is having a wonderful relationship of life with Jesus Christ. I mean, it's beyond words. For 51 years. There's nothing that can describe it, nothing. So I'll be in the back, and then come here for the reception. I'll be in here as well. But if you want to talk to me, or anybody have a question like to ask me about anything, my life, my music, my Social Security number, or anything you'd like to, anyone now want to ask me? Yeah, okay, yes.
How long does it take you to start from scratch and memorize 15 minutes worth of a song?
Yeah. So this is really, my teacher, Juilliard, really gave me this system of learning a piece from the beginning. So this is 10 hours a day, and it's how I work on it. And I start on a Monday morning, and by Thursday morning, I've learned the whole piece by memory. So it's a tremendous system. It's almost like a computer. You're feeding your mind with all this data. And so in 4 days, I can learn a piece. So this is a piece, not 15 minutes. Let's say a piece is 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes. I can learn a piece in 4 days. And then you give me about 3 weeks or so. I have to play it about 50 times for my wife as a run-through performance, and then I can start to play it in front of people in that sense. But really, a piece I can learn and memorize it, and I can play it in Monday, and then by Thursday I've learned the whole piece. Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? Any question? Anything? Well, good. Anything you want to share, Jerry? Or
No, just Sam, appreciate you being here.
no problem. Thank you.
It was a real burden for you to come.
No, it's okay. Just stayed in my pajamas all day till about 3 o'clock. And I mean, I was way too tired of church and everything. I hope the Lord understands and stuff. But, well, good. Come for the reception. There's tremendous cakes. And yes, go ahead.
Could you tell them something about your friends at Juilliard and your relationship with them?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, these 3 friends, I've stayed in touch with them. I mean, what I'm saying is that, well, what happened was the next day I saw these friends. I says, well, I've come to believe Jesus is the Messiah, and I feel completely changed. I said, what do I do now? They said, come to church with us. And I said, okay. And I remember that. I said, okay. I mean, here I'm a Jew going to synagogue, and, 2 days later I was in a Baptist church, and boy, this man was preaching about Jesus, and people were singing at the top of their lungs. I mean, it was tremendous. So actually, one of the fellows, we talk almost every 2 weeks. I mean, after 51 years, he calls me all the time from New Jersey. I call him. Usually if I'm on a drive to a concert, he always knows, that I'm... and then when I don't answer the phone, he always leaves the same message. Sam, where are you? Are you in Afghanistan? He always says the same thing. He doesn't know where I'm at or something. So I hear from him. And then another fellow who was one of the 3 I stay in touch with, he's in Chicago. He's in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. We've done concerts together. And actually, the Chicago Symphony is coming and playing in January in Mesa, so I'm going to hopefully see him. And the 3rd fellow developed cancer, sadly, about 12, 13 years ago, and has gone to be with the Lord. And when I heard, Keith was his name, Keith Gates, I had some schedule, some programs. I had enough time. I had time to change it, and so I flew to Louisiana where he lived and spent few days, 3 days with him, about 3 days. It was very sweet, very nice, I mean, very special. And then I spoke to him the day before he went to be with the Lord. Yeah, I talked to his wife, and she said, please talk to Keith, and he couldn't respond very well. But, so one has gone to be with the Lord, and one of them I hear from once in a while, and one I hear from all the time. So, oh yeah, after 51 years, and talk about the Lord and about living for the Lord. So, yep. It wasn't sort of, people have asked me, those friends that you have, did they know that you came to faith? Oh, yeah, they knew. And well, 2 of them were in my wedding, right, Deb? Yeah, 2 of them were in my wedding, and one of them was the official photographer. So, yeah, Keith and Hart were in my wedding, and David took photographs, yeah. Okay, we're done. My wife wants to have some dessert. And as the pastor would say, you're dismissed.